Hey Balancers, and welcome back to another episode of the Balance Theory podcast. I'm your host Erika, and today we're going to have a really fun episode. So it's my 29th birthday, and I'm going to be sharing 29 things or lessons that I have learned during my 20s that I would go back and tell my 20-year-old self, but also serve as a really nice checklist or reminder for everybody listening of just little things that we can adopt day to day, whether it be through a mindset, whether it be through a habit. And I feel this really just summarizes all the growth I've had throughout my 20s and is a really nice way to just bring in the last year of my 20s before we hit the big 3-0. Each of these actually have really helped me become my best self as well. And I feel that it was only once I really truly embraced each of these and started to get curious about what each of them meant in my life, it really had a powerful shift in terms of how I showed up. I'd love to hear which of these resonated most with you. So make sure you drop a comment on which lesson or which reminder really stuck out for you. But let's get straight into it. First lesson or reminder I would tell myself, or something that I've learned, is you're not meant to have everything figured out. In fact, a big realization for me was realizing that life is not this puzzle that we need to figure out. It's actually just an experience that we're moving through. I think this is a really strong temptation. We go to uni and we need to figure out what we want to do with our lives, right? Same thing when we finish school, or we start a career and we need to figure out what direction we want to move in. Same thing if you start a business. If you're starting a family, we need to figure out all these things. But I think one thing I've really come to embrace more recently is that we're not meant to have it all figured out, and it's actually all just an experience. We're meant to experience all these different things. This just takes the pressure off day to day, what you're moving through and how you actually enjoy it or embrace it. Number 2 is the importance of investing in strong relationships with friends and family. I think this one has become more apparent to me since I moved overseas. Not having that regular face-to-face time with my best friends, with my family, has been really difficult and has made me really appreciate those relationships on a deeper level. Their importance in terms of how they build out your support network, how they're people to turn to in moments when you need them, is indescribable. And it's also a nice reminder you're actually not meant to just be alone and work things out on your own. You can and should lean on those friendships and relationships. So investing in those is the most important use of your time and the most powerful thing you can do for yourself. Number 3 is the importance of learning to say no and setting boundaries. I always say it's one thing to set a boundary and learn how to say no, but it's actually another thing to stick to it. I don't know if anyone listening has had this experience where they've actually tried to say no or set a boundary and it just feels so counterintuitive. You know, for anyone that's struggled with people-pleasing tendencies or not really knowing how to assert themselves, and you probably resonate with this, which is where I've been in the past. But what that's meant is throughout my 20s, I've spent so much time doing things for other people just because I haven't had the confidence and backbone basically to stand up for what it is that I actually want. More to the point, I think when you don't have that clarity in terms of what kind of life you want to live, the things you actually want to achieve, it's very difficult to say no to people because you don't know what you're saying no for. So getting that clarity is really important. And I'm quickly going to link a video in the show notes, another episode where I actually talk about how you can get this clarity. And we'll go on a deep dive on it in that episode together. But basically this skill of learning to say no and set boundaries is very, very important. 4, easier said than done, but it's really important not to compare yourself to others because everyone has their own path. I think for me, I struggled with this a lot, particularly when I was starting new things, right? Starting the podcast, starting a business, starting a new life overseas. Generally, we like to pick someone we're inspired by to compare ourselves to. And what that means is we're comparing ourselves at the beginning of our journey to someone who's 5 to 10 to 20 years deep into theirs. Sometimes you come across those people who are quote unquote an overnight success. And I think social media complicates this whole process, right? We have access to people's highlights and we don't get the full picture. But if you can really refrain from comparing yourself and appreciating that everyone comes to the table with their own challenges and hurdles that you just can't see on a highlight reel, it really just takes the pressure off yourself and it keeps you just single lane focused. You know, when you're worried about what other people are doing or you're letting that dictate your own path and what your achievements mean in the context of other people, you're just derailing yourself from your own journey and what's meant for you. So learning to detach and just be in your own path is something I'm still ongoingly learning, but something that I have found once I tapped into really changed my perspective and shifted where my energy was going. Number 5, it's really important to pursue interests and hobbies outside of your quote unquote work. When I say work, I'm talking about your career or a business you're building. The reason this is the case is I genuinely think it is impossible to have a job, a career, or a business where every single one of your interests and skills are satisfied. What that means is you can leverage off hobbies or things outside of work, like your interests, to beef out your life experience. So between your job or your business and your hobbies, you're really getting a full-rounded experience of all the things you're interested in. Take this podcast as an example. I started it 4 years ago. I was a corporate lawyer and I was really missing that deep, authentic, introspective conversation, right? It's something that does not feature at all in legal work, in legal conversations. And so I started this podcast to really nurture that interest area of mine. Had I not done that, I would have continued this path with this single career and really felt like something was missing. So for anyone listening who resonates with that, the importance of having hobbies is really just to build out your experience. It takes the pressure off your job or your business being the one thing that satisfies you. And it just gives you that space to experiment and be creative and have a bit of fun in things that you may not be getting from your full-time gig, whatever that looks like. 6, this is one 20-year-old me would not have embraced if I hadn't kind of gone through the last 9 years. But that is embrace every networking opportunity. Now, I don't know about you guys, but for me, I used to look at networking and think of it as agenda specific. So I'm looking for a new job or I want to meet XYZ person, so I'm going to go to a networking event. But the more I've gone on and the more networking things I've exposed myself to, it is very apparent to me the power in networking, in going to these events, in just meeting different people, even when you don't need to, right? When you don't have a specific agenda, because building out your network is very, very important to building out different levels of foundation. You never know when you're going to need to make a call, when you're going to need to leverage a relationship. Even you may be able to be the connection between introducing two people together. And people don't forget when you have been a key player in introducing them to someone who's made a difference in their life. And so using networking as a way to just build out your relationships and meet different people, even when you don't have to, is a very important skill that I have only appreciated, to be honest with you guys, from doing this podcast, because it's pushed me to network and meet different people and reach out to people outside of my comfort zone, just with the agenda of getting to know them, right? And I think you never know when those relationships will serve you down the track. So having even just something as simple as going to one networking event a quarter and just going there with an open mind of just meeting people and connecting, I think pays dividends and is something we should all have. The 7th thing is to keep your personal growth and self-improvement as a priority. I spoke about this a little bit in our last solo episode. We were talking about the habits you need to foster that or really make that front and center in your life. And I would assume, because you're listening to this podcast, that probably is already a priority of yours, but really just keeping that a priority and making it a regular weekly thing means you're constantly evolving, questioning yourself, creating that space. And that's a really, really important skill to have. Number 8 is learn how to manage your stress effectively. I didn't really used to think about this much in my early 20s. I used to just go. And, when it got too much, I would kind of address it then. But again, it's this proactive approach. So what habits or skills you currently have to manage stress on an ongoing basis, no matter how small or big it is? Do you have a practice of spending time alone, of breathing? Do you go to therapy? There's so many different things you can do and different things work for different people, but just having something that helps you navigate your stress is really important, because it does compound, it does pile up, and waiting for it to get too much to the point where we're burnt out or having a mental breakdown is not conducive. It really sets you back. It's like one step forward, but like 5 steps back. So having a practice to manage that ongoingly is game changing. Number 9, a little bit of a physical one, is just take care of your skin. Basic hydration, simple skincare routine, make that a priority. It's just such a basic thing you can do that you in 50 years time will thank yourself for. It's the quickest thing you can do on a daily basis, and it's great for your overall health as well. So making that a priority is something, I've shifted into really appreciating the older I'm getting. Number 10 is shifting your attention to invest in experiences over material possessions. I read this amazing book called Solve for Happy. It's by an author called Mo Gadot. I think that's how you pronounce his surname. But truthfully, it is one of the most amazing books I've ever read. And he shares his experience about how he was very successful at a young age. I think he was a multimillionaire by the time he was in his late 20s. And it got to a point where he had, 2-3 supercars, but he didn't feel happy. So he thought maybe they were the wrong color. So he bought another supercar in another color, to a point where he had 9 supercars, and then he still wasn't happy. Same thing with, buying different houses or material possessions, so on and so forth. And this might seem like a very obvious statement for many of you, but I think when you start to create wealth for yourself, where you start to get a bigger paycheck and you have the disposable income to buy these designer things, it is a temptation, right? And I think back to the last couple of years where there's been, let's just say a Louis Vuitton bag that I wanted, but I didn't get it at the time. But it was something I always wanted. I think now back, I've kind of like changed my taste, and I wouldn't have liked it. But that money I would have spent on the bag, I could have gone on a 2-3 week holiday and created experiences and spent time connecting with people that outlives those material possessions. I'm not saying those things, you shouldn't have material possessions at all. But I think just thinking about the return on your investment, I guess, from investing in experiences versus material possessions is a really interesting thing to think about, especially in a time in our 20s where we're coming into that adulthood of, I've got money, I can do whatever I want with it, and just thinking about what's actually important to you and what's going to create the most for the longevity of your life. Just an interesting one to think about. Number 11 is having a practice of gratitude and mindfulness. I always say I never want to be prescriptive when it comes to what this exactly looks like, because from person to person, it's going to change completely. For you, it might be journaling or meditation or spending time outside. But whatever it is, having that regular time and space for yourself helps you be present, helps you hear yourself, and I think is a really important thing to embrace. I know when I go days being lazy without embracing that habit, I really feel it in my sense of groundedness. And so it's now become a non-negotiable for me. And I think had I started that 10 years ago, it would maybe potentially be easier for me now, but really learning that is something that is important, and to remind anyone that's listening that's also been maybe a bit slack with having that as a priority, the power it can have in anchoring you to the day-to-day moments in your life. Number 12 is to learn basic financial management. So I'm not an economist. I certainly don't have a financial background. I've interviewed incredible people on the show who have spoken about it. One woman in particular, Bday, Elizabeth, I will link that episode in the show notes below for anyone interested. She really takes us through the basics of some fundamentals with habits, with money. But I think just starting to think about having a saving strategy, understanding what investing means and what making your money work for you means, starting to think about different types of investments. I grew up in Australia and it was very much property centric, buy a property, pay it off. That's your investment. Starting to think about different things and what that might look like. Just getting your financial literacy up and having some basic strategies for yourself is very, very important, especially to set yourself up for long-term success. And it doesn't matter if you only have 5-10% left over every month for the end of your paycheck. You can make that work for you in many different ways. So just getting cluey on those things, starting to get interested, I think is a really powerful tool that you can have for yourself, especially in this time of your life. Number 13, go to therapy even if you don't need it. I've been very honest and open on this show about the work I've done on myself. And if you're anything like me, maybe you used to think, or you do think, that you only need to seek help when something traumatic happens in your life. And I genuinely had this approach myself. It was maybe 10, 15 years ago. My parents, they got a very interesting backstory. They were married, they got divorced. Then they remarried each other, then they re-divorced again. And that kind of happened over a 10 to 12 year period. And my dad was just kind of like, I need to send the 4 of you to therapy because I don't know what I've done. He's just like, just go. And I was like, I'm fine. Like, I don't feel like I need it. Like, I'm sweet type thing. Like, I was a bit older at the time. I understood that relationships don't necessarily work out, but he made me go. And it was honestly the best thing he could have done, because what I realized sitting there with this therapist was I just had space to express some thoughts I had, to talk about what was going on. And she was honestly just like a third party perspective that just helped me think about things in a different way. It wasn't this case of I need so much help and work because I'm dealing with all this tough thing. And honestly, like sometimes that is the case and you may not even know it to be true. But what I'm trying to say is you don't need to wait for something like that to be the case or the catalyst for you to go and get help. It can be a case of you just wanting to vent with an unbiased person who can just help you redirect your thoughts and understand things in a bit of a different perspective. And I remember she said just one thing and I was like, I hadn't thought about it like that before. And that simple interaction just changed my whole approach to therapy. And about 4 years ago, I worked with a woman called Chantel. I've had her on the podcast and she took me through high performance coaching, but it was kind of woven in with therapy as well, right? So you work through your limiting beliefs, which by the way are things that are subconscious. They're not things that you're aware of. And so for me, it wasn't a case of I've got this trauma, let's work through it. Again, if that's the case, then therapy also has a role to play. But using it as a tool to just get to know yourself better on a deeper level with a professional that is unbiased and can just help you work through things in a way that's outside of what you can do for yourself is so powerful, like unbelievably powerful. I'm going to also drop a link to the episode I did with Chantel because I really tried to condense 2 years of working with her into a 45-minute episode. And honestly, the people that have listened to that one have told me how much they've gotten out of it. And it really does give you a good glimpse as to what something like that might look like for you. So check it out if that's something you're interested in, but go to therapy even if you don't need it. Trust me. Number 14, managing your digital footprint. I'm not just talking about those embarrassing Facebook statuses from 15 years ago that we all cringe at when they pop up. I'm talking about the way you show up online, the things you say on other people's posts, captions you're writing, things you put on your stories. Make sure that everything you are leaving aligns with you, represents your values, because we don't know what the future of the internet looks like. We don't know what our kids are going to have access to in the future, our grandchildren, our future families, just anything in general, future employers even. So managing your digital footprint and being very mindful with the way you show up online is very important, and I think is not something we really think about on a day-to-day basis. We think of the internet as just this software thing that's outside of ourselves, but really just being mindful and just considering your digital footprint and what tracks you're leaving behind. Just having that top of mind, wasn't something I came into my 20s thinking of, but it's something I'm like quite mindful of, especially with the amount of content I'm putting out there. But I think irrespective, whether you're putting as much out as I am or not, manage your digital footprint. Number 15, learn to negotiate and advocate for yourself. This is a very, very important skill, not only in a professional context, but also personal. I think it goes hand in hand with the whole setting boundaries thing and sticking up for what it is you want. But all of this is all good and well, but you really need to know what it is that you want, right? Have clarity on what's aligned for you, what things you're prepared to tolerate, and then having the skills to actually do that, whether it's through YouTube content creators or other videos, learning how to actually just stand up for yourself in a way that feels aligned for you, I think is really important. I had a friend of mine, Nimi Mehta, on the show, and we were speaking about this juncture between being nice and being assertive. For a lot of people, I feel like if you identify or you feel like you're a bit of a people pleaser, which hands up, I was quite a few years ago, I used to think that if you're not nice, you're being mean, right? They were like the two ends of the spectrum. But when I had Nimi on, we really broke this down and we were talking about how you can be assertive but still be nice. And this really, really shifted the way I was thinking about it, because it meant I could be assertive in a way that was aligned for me. I didn't have to be rude, which I thought was the opposite of being nice, but it meant I could still stand up for myself without being mean or overstretching or acting in a way that wasn't aligned for me. I'm not really an aggressive and direct kind of person. I'm a little bit more of a diplomat, shall we say. So learning how to assert myself in a way that fit into that diplomatic box has been really important for me. So start to think about the way you like to show up in life, what's aligned for you, and then how you can assert yourself within those parameters. Number 16 is investing in the quality of your relationships over the quantity. When I finished school, I'm not joking, I think I had probably 100 acquaintances. And I was that person that any little shred of time I had, I would call someone, coffee, catch up. And it was all very surface level stuff. But I was busy, I had a big network, and that's how I liked it. But I think COVID did wonders in terms of detoxing the people you actually connected with, because you had, it was like a complete wiping of and a reset of the people that you actually meaningfully connected with. Because if you weren't seeing them just by chance in the office or just out of routine or habit of wherever you go on a regular basis, then it was really up to both of you to go out of your way to connect with each other. Me moving overseas has been a secondary layer of detox. And now I have a lot less friends. I'd say no acquaintances, a lot less friends, but I have so much more to give to those people, and those relationships give me so much more. And so for anyone maybe juggling a lot of different types of relationships, it's more important to look and pay attention to the quality over the quantity. Number 17 is learning to let go of toxic relationships and toxic environments. For me, this has looked like, when you're in a big friendship group and you're really close with some people, you're not that close with other people, but then there's some people you really don't get on with, and that can be quite toxic sometimes, especially when you're in that awkward situation of you're all in the same group. Or maybe it is you love your job and what you do, but you find the environment very toxic. This is a clear mismatch between you and your values and these relationships or these environments. And the sooner you learn to part with those things or decide that you're going to actively look for something different is really important for you. And learning to not, accept that or tolerate it is very key to creating the life you want. But just having that at front of mind and realizing the second you know something is toxic, to protect yourself or create some distance or start taking active steps to distance yourself. Because the longer you stay in that, the more it just takes so much energy to pretend to be okay or just to show up in situations that are not aligned for you, especially with work, right? Where it's like the majority of your week. So this is a big one to tackle if it's something you're facing. Number 18 was learning to have a quarterly, biannual, and yearly check-in of my goals. So historically, I would just write my goals in January and kind of sit back and see how they would go. I'd plan things out, but I would never really recheck in with them. What I've learned over the years is that because I'm on this journey of growing and changing and being quite introspective, I am changing all the time. So 6 months into my year, I may be a little bit of a different person that the goals I set 6 months before couldn't have anticipated, that next version I would become. And it's in that next version that some of those initial goals maybe don't align for me anymore. And it's having the courage to reflect, giving yourself that check-in, and then actually quote unquote quit the goals that are no longer serving you or no longer aligned, rather than just doing them for the sake of you set them in January. And this habit has been really important to keep me on track and help me redirect and readjust where I need to. So set those regular check-ins. We can't just take what our January selves set as, the Bible, as what's set in stone. We can change and adapt those. And we've had 6 months now to see, have we made progress? Have we been motivated? Is it something we still want? And if not, don't feel afraid to cut them off, because then you're just wasting time doing something that's no longer aligned for you when there could be something else that genuinely is. Number 19, the bread and butter of this show is to get clear on your balance. Now, the balance theory is a whole concept in and of itself that I won't have time to go into today. So I'm going to link a free 20-minute workshop I did that basically will take you through the whole thing and explain to you how to find your own unique balance. But it's basically moving away from this concept that there's this work-life balance or 80-20 or 50-50. Those formulas cannot account for the nuances, the priorities, the different things that vary from person to person. And so the balance series approach is a very tailored, unique approach that gives you flexibility to move with the changes of your life. But actually sitting down and contemplating what does that look like for you is a very necessary step Because otherwise you go about having these habits and trying out all these different things to create a life that you haven't really sat down to think about. Is that the type of life I want? Is that the type of balance I want in my life? What things am I working on right now? And what do I need to do to actually support those things coming to fruition? So working on your balance and getting clear on that is key. Is something you should be doing on an ongoing basis. 20, keep track and celebrate your milestones, no matter how big or small. If you've got a yearly goal, every little increment or genuine milestone you have in achieving that bigger milestone should be celebrated. Whether it's through keeping track on a spreadsheet, whether it's through taking yourself out to dinner, whether it's through rewarding yourself with something, you need to celebrate the milestones, because we often see achieving these goals as the end point, right? As this moment in time where we're done, but it's actually just a goalpost, right? Where we hit it and we set something else and we keep going. So if we're working so hard this whole time to hit this one thing and then we just move on, there's never any moment to relish in what you've actually achieved. And then you just end up doing all this stuff and feeling like you're not making any progress because you haven't actually appreciated what you've done. So break down your big goals into small milestones and celebrate those as the time comes up. Number 21 is learning to manage your time effectively through energy management. So quite simply, this is just asking yourself, are you a morning or a night person? When do you have the most energy? What habits sit around you working most productively, and structuring your time alongside that? So it's less looking at, I need to work 8 hours a day, and it's more looking at, okay, in that 8 hours, when do I have the most energy? Can I do my most important tasks then? And then when my energy tapers off in the afternoon, what things can I do in that period in time? And actually looking at your week or your time in terms of energy management. That's been a very important shift for me, moving from time management to energy management. Number 22, this is something I actually shared on my LinkedIn in a post. I was celebrating that we crossed 50,000 on YouTube, which is so incredible. We've grown 8,000% in the last 6 months, which is crazy. I've been doing this podcast for 4 years, and it's really exciting to finally reach so many of you and grow our community. But when I was reflecting on some key things that really made sense for me, or that I've learned in the 4 years of me doing this podcasting journey, one thing that really stood out to me was this idea that if you want something you've never had, you have to do something you've never done before. And that kind of mantra helped me be really comfortable with being outside of my comfort zone. It meant that when I was doing things and felt like I had no idea what I was doing, it was this like making peace with myself, right? I'm trying to achieve something I've never had before. So I'm in the process of doing things I've never done before. So it's just like a really nice reminder for anyone feeling that discomfort, feeling that loss or uncertainty, like you're literally pushing yourself to do something different because you want something different. And that's a really necessary part of changing your circumstance or getting something that you are striving for. Another thing I shared, which is actually going to be number 23, is that if it was easy, everyone would have it. It's a mantra my husband and I tell each other time and time again, because we face so many challenges in trying to create this life that's so different to what our day-to-day lives were in Australia. It's so necessary for where we want to go. But we have to remind each other all the time, if it was easy, everyone would have it. So there's necessary hurdles or barriers to entry that you have to cross through the form of challenges and obstacles. And that's why not everybody has it. Why I love this one so much is it reminds me, like, if I just push through this challenge, push through this hurdle, I'm one step closer to getting something that not a lot of people have because they give up when these things present themselves. It's just a really beautiful mantra that's helped me achieve and move through different things. 24. Oh, this should be the one and only thing I've said because it's that important to me. It's prioritizing your sleep and a sleep or bedtime night routine. We so often talk about our morning routines and how we set ourselves up for the day, but genuinely how you go to bed is how you wake up. If you have a bad night's sleep, if you don't fall asleep for ages and don't have a long sleep, you're not going to wake up energized to be able to do your 6-step morning routine. Having a night routine, whether that be through my no phone rule, which I shared on the episode 2 weeks ago when I was talking about habits for self-improvement, winding down properly, getting yourself ready for sleep so that your sleep quality is high, so that you're refreshed to start the next day is so important. And I know 18-year-old me used to be able to come home 3, 4 a.m. from a night out clubbing and get up at 7 and work in a cafe all day and do it all again the next day. You know, the older you get, the more you appreciate sleep, that reset, how beautiful it is as a practice to get yourself ready for the next day. And I just feel like I'm a natural koala. The older I'm getting, like I really love and appreciate sleep, but having a routine at night to get you prepped and get your body, you know, like for me, it's just have a warm shower, not be on my phone, sometimes doing a bit of yin yoga or reading, just gentle, slow things that get my mind saying, okay, we're getting ready for that time of day again. Very, very important. Number 25, stay curious and have hobbies and don't be ashamed of them. And the reason I say that is I used to be so hush-hush about what I would be doing outside of work. I have an e-commerce business, I have this podcast, and it's like I didn't want anyone in my law firm knowing because I didn't want them to think that I was doing anything except work. I somehow felt like that would make me less of a lawyer or seem like less interested in my job. But when I reflect and when I really think about it, it's really silly to think that what I do in my spare time would make me look like less of a professional in my work hours. Like that's my spare time. That's my personal time. And in fact, I've now completely shifted that. I almost shout from the mountaintops the things I do in my spare time, because I think at the end of the day, we're all here qualified in the same degree. We do the same job. What distinguishes us are our interests. So I'm so curious to know, you know, if someone is a pro skier outside of work, or they love surfing in Asia, or, you know, they are an artist, or it's different things that really add to someone's character. And as I shared in one of our previous episodes, like hobbies are also the space we have to expand our interests and just have a more well-rounded life experience. Because otherwise you put pressure on your job being the only thing that satisfies you, that ticks all your boxes. And that's often really not true. There's often some lingering skills or interests we have that are really best suited or catered for via hobbies. So don't be afraid to explore them, have them, and don't be ashamed of them either. Number 26. This is one I've learned, interestingly, more recently, but it's so obvious to me how powerful it is. And that is the idea of mastering how you think and feel about yourself. This very simply summarized for me is like when I think and feel about myself in a positive way, in an expansive way, in an abundant way, the opportunities I get are mirrored in that self-representation, versus if I'm in this victim mentality, stuck in limiting beliefs like I'm not good enough, equally, the opportunities I get are reflective of that. So if you're currently striving for something or working towards a new opportunity or trying to embrace something different, but you have a maybe low self-esteem, or you have limiting beliefs that are pinning you down, like you're not good enough or you're not worthy of what you're trying to do, you're not going to achieve those opportunities. You may get them presented to you, but you may not embrace them because you don't think you're good enough or worthy, or the energy you have to actually move through them is inconsistent, right? So working on that foundation of how you think and feel about yourself is so important and has been the cornerstone to anything that I've achieved. 3 more to go. We're almost there. Number 27 is listen to your gut. I feel like especially as females, not to diss any of the men listening, but I feel like more so for females, our intuition is very, very strong. And I think in a more corporate professional setting, we're maybe less encouraged to tap into that, especially from like a rational business mindset. But genuinely, the more women I speak to that are entrepreneurs, that have their own very successful multi-million-dollar companies, the more things I do for myself, when I come from that intuitive, authentic place, I feel like I never make the wrong decision. My gut always knows. Listen to your gut. When I was younger, it's not something I tapped into at all. It was something I ignored actually quite a lot of the time because people were older than me, they knew better. But listening to this has been game changing. And I think just for anyone listening who's been ignoring their own gut, learn how to embrace it and listen to it, because it is your inner voice telling you what you need. Number 28, think about the 5 key influences in your life and whether they are supporting or hindering where you want to go. Generally, people talk about this in terms of the 5 most influential people in your life. But I genuinely think this isn't just limited to people you see on a day-to-day basis or regularly, right? So it might be your best friend, your husband, or your partner, another friend, a mentor, etc. But I think if you have a content creator that you regularly listen to, so say that's his podcast, another podcast, an author you always read, I think you can count those as influencers as well, which is quite nice because you can start to really build a very strong, powerful influence around you, because those are the voices or things you're tapping into constantly that help shape the way you think about things. The reason I wanted to include that is because I think we are consuming content a lot more so than what we were in the past. I think that's indisputable. But instead of just looking at people we physically spend time with, think about the content you're consuming. Because if you're consuming content that's making you feel less worthy or like you're not good enough, or you feel like you're comparing yourself because of that content, that is a key influence in your life. It's going to impact the way you think and feel about not only yourself, but where you're going. So think about the 5 key influences and whether that's helping or hindering your direction. And lucky last, remember that your 20s are a time for exploration, for experimentation. And if we loop it back to number 1, it's not a time for you to figure things out. Life is there to be embraced and experienced. We're not on this planet for very long in the scheme of things. And so learning to just experience and embrace things that come up, not put so much pressure on ourselves to have it figured out, and actually use this time to experiment. You know, if you're like me, it's before you're starting a family, before you have massive liabilities, let's say, in terms of debt or things like that, you have the freedom to experiment and really go after intuitively what you want. So use that time to explore and discover yourself in a fun way that takes the pressure off, because at the end of the day, remember, you don't need to have it all figured out. So that's it from me, guys. Those are 29, I guess, lessons or things that I've been reflecting on from this last decade of life. I just wanted to share them so they could serve as a really nice reminder for me, for everyone listening, of little things they can start to tweak, adopt, or think about. Maybe you want to sit down and reflect on your own last 10 years. This is a really nice birthday practice as well. But I hope it's given you guys just some key reminders, maybe some things that you've been ignoring or really wanting to implement into your routine. At the end of the day, all these things have been pivotal for me to create my own balance, for me to get to know myself better, and for me to create the life I want, which is why we're here talking together on this show. So that's it from me, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on so you don't miss any of our future episodes. And I'll see you all next week for another interview. Until then, stay balanced.